There we go.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last webinar of the C9&Friends webinar series. My name is Michaela, and I'm the marketing coordinator at Cloud9. And with me, I have, as usual, Micke, and actually our two other colleagues today. But Micke, you can start introducing yourself.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Mikael Östling, Key Account Manager at Cloud9. Today, actually, I am broadcasting live from Helsinki together with my colleague Mariem. So, as you know, we have offices both in Stockholm and Helsinki and also now in Poland. So I'm visiting Helsinki for a couple of days. And yeah, it's the final episode in our webinar series.
Yes, and so we have had four. This is the fourth of four webinars that we had, and you could see a speed. And Mickey, you will go more into detail about.
Yeah. Today's talk is we're kind of wrapping up the talks we have had so far. So we have been talking. The kind of general theme throughout these talks has been modern e-commerce. So we started up with from a UX perspective with Camilla. Then we have driven into some platform alternatives. And today's topic is about speed and why does it matter? Does it matter if my website loads 1 second faster or not? And it actually does. It's super crucial. It has always been, and it's always been a challenge to build, intricate, engaging websites and having them load quickly. And David, our strategist, and Mariem, our tech lead, they will talk about this, share insights on why it matters, how you can measure it, share some thoughts about low-hanging fruit. We will share some really exciting case studies of companies, brands that are using the modern page speed methods to really see huge improvement in terms of conversion and business value. And I hope this will be. I know this will be an interesting talk, and I think that will let David and Mariem take the stage, starting with David. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mika. Yes, so I'll be sharing my screen. As usual, one has to do these little things to get things going. And I hope you can see my screen. Anyway, to start off, let's talk about the benefits of having a fast site. Well, there are two obvious things. One is that you get actually better ranking on Google because Google takes into account whether your site loads fast or not. And the other thing is that you can actually get better conversion rates if you have a fast site. There have been quite a lot of studies about this. One of the oldest, I think it was from like 2016 or 2013 or something, Google did a study and saw that about half of users will abandon a site if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. And I mean, this was already a couple of years ago. And we could say that when it comes to mobile commerce and mobile e-commerce, this has become really, really important. A lot of sites before were optimized for desktop, and perhaps one didn't think of image sizes and things like that when it came to mobile, but that is really, really important. There was quite a recent study by Deloitte and Google actually about this, where they looked how mobile site speeds actually affected conversion rates. And what they saw was that even a very small increase in speed can actually boost conversion rates quite significantly. This is an interesting report. You can find it online. So we have to start somewhere. So first of all, we have to know how to actually measure a site's speed. What is a fast site and how do we measure it? One of the main tools for this is Page Speed Insights by Google, which are free and available for everybody. And what they do basically is they define a number of points, a number of sort of states for the web page that they have, like to use to measure the load speed. And one thing which is pretty important is what is actually visible to the end user. And the term for this is, they talk about contentful paint, which means that something is actually painted up that you can see, which is like the first user interaction, basically, that you can actually see something on the screen. And the largest contentful paint is when most of the web page is loaded, so that you actually can see all that is visible on the page. There might still be other things loading in the background, but they are not important for your experience. Another thing which is really important is first input delay, which is how long it actually takes from when you press a call to action button or you do something on the site to it when it actually responds. And this is also something which can be really, really annoying if you have a long delay between your input and how the site responds. If you're putting something into the cart, if you're looking at from a category page to a product page, and that delay is too big, that will annoy you definitely and lower the conversion rate. When it comes to Google Page Insights, there are two different measurements really, and one is really interesting, and that is what they call perceived speed. And that means that they use actual data from Chrome users that using the Chrome browser, and they can actually see how page speeds are from all these users. So they aggregate the data, and you can sort of see it geographically and so on. And then they have like a sort of lab test which subjects your page to a number of different sort of more laboratory tests where they sort of measure different things. But the perceived speed is really interesting. Here's an example from Amazon, which I'll be talking about more, but Amazon is a very fast site. This is Amazon.ic, and as you can see, you have a number of metrics here, like the first contentful paint, which is 0.9 seconds, and the largest contentful page is 2 seconds. So we can say that in principle, what you see on Amazon loads in about 2 seconds, and that is this is for desktop. You can see 2 views up the top. There's a tab for mobile and one for desktop. If you want to go even deeper and see what's actually happening, then you can, using the Chrome browser, you can look under something called the Performance tab. And here you can actually see what's going on. You can see what is being sent from the server and what is actually being loaded. It might be a bit small on your screen, but there are timings here, and you can actually see the first contentful paint, the load times, and so on. This is also from Amazon, and you can see that the time between first paint and largest contentful paint is very, very quick. I think it's something in the region of 400 milliseconds, which means that this is actually a faster speed than on mobile than on desktop. If you look at a typical site, though, you will usually find a much longer load time. I'm not going to say what site this is, but you can see that now we're talking about more in the region of 3 seconds, which is pretty normal actually, and typical for an e-commerce site today. But it's still interesting to look at what happens, and you can deep dive into your site and check this out. There are, of course, other tools. Google is not the only player that has a way of measuring load speed. We have Pingdom, for instance, which we use quite a lot, both for monitoring sites and also for checking load speeds. And here you can actually test from different places. You can see whether your site will load fast enough from sort of around the world. So they have test servers around the world that you can use to gauge how fast your site is. So when it comes to increasing speed, there are actually quite a lot of low-hanging fruit here. And one of the obvious things is obviously image and video file sizes. which I suppose everyone who is working with a website of any type is very aware of. But still, it's something which you really should look into. A lot of modern platforms, of course, have sort of scaling algorithms and will actually, using code, will rescale an image and make it smaller. This is much more difficult with video, of course, so it's really important to make sure that you have that kind of, you have perhaps alternative videos or video files for different resolutions in different browsers. But when it comes to images, you can actually make some pretty significant reductions in size if you optimize an image. Both these images are actually exactly, I mean, for me, they look exactly the same in a normal browser, but one of them is 4 times as large as the other. And that means that there is quite a lot of unnecessary data being sent in the first case here. They're still the same pixel size, they have the same sort of measurements, but actually the file itself, they've reduced a lot of the repeated data so that you can actually, it's a what you call a lossy conversion. So it means that for the eye, it works the same, but for the server, it's much of a lower load. There are other formats, of course, coming up. There's something called WebP, which has been used for quite a long time now, which is actually a format which Facebook uses. They take images that you upload and they make them into the WebP format, but the WebP format is not actually supported by all browsers and is also a Google product. So it's not sort of loved by everybody. There is also the JPEG XL project, which is another from the JPEG group, which is trying to make JPEGs smaller as well. So there are some developments here, and I'm sure we'll see sort of even better formats moving forward. Content distribution networks is another thing which you should definitely use if you are hosting a site which is actually viewed by people on different continents, for instance. A content distribution network means that you actually have multiple servers or proxies where you have you send data the shortest way possible, basically, from the person who is trying to access the site. And this can be for part of your data or all of it. It depends. There are quite a lot of these. Cloudflare and Akamai are the biggest. Fastly is also pretty big. There are also a number of telco companies that have their own content distribution networks, which can be pretty clever using them if you, for instance, want to get to a certain mobile network, then they have their own content distribution networks which will work very quickly on those browsers that people are using in their mobiles. But anyway, it can make a pretty significant difference, because the time to load makes a great difference to how you perceive a site. And so just to repeat, I mean, between about 300 milliseconds and 1 second, that is really fast. Yeah. Anyway, so another thing which is important to think about is tracking and pixels. A lot of data is sent using these tracking scripts. We have sort of both Facebook and Google Analytics and AdSense and Hotjar and other things that we use to monitor how a site is actually working. But if these scripts are loaded, or these pixels are loaded in the wrong part of the actual data transfer, then they will slow down your site. So this is really important to optimize. Another thing you have to think about when it comes to tracking is of course, what data do you actually need to collect? I think there is a lot of, what shall we say, standard stuff that you install without really thinking about it. Because remember, when you collect data, you should actually use it. Otherwise, you are just spending a lot of money on bandwidth, which is not, doing anyone any good. And an important thing here, of course, is that the page elements and the scripts and everything that you load on a page should be in the right order, so that you have the UX, or the visible parts of the page, loaded first. And a typical thing here is, for instance, if you have Google Tag Manager, which is very common, that you make sure that you have the non-essential triggers later in the loading. And you can actually decide in Google Tag Manager when they will fire these scripts and put them later in the load cycle for the page. CMS plugins, another thing very quickly. There are lots of plugins for big platforms like Shopify and WordPress. And some of these are very good and very fast, and they do really nice things like contact forms and boosting SEO and stuff. But some of them are also pretty inefficient and can actually slow your site down. So it's important to check that out, that they are of good quality. So look at the ones that you've got and turn the ones off that you're not actually using. And if you want to test how quick they are, go to your staging environment, which you should have, turn off all the plugins you have for your platform and turn them on one at a time, and make sure that none of them actually are slowing down the site a lot. Lazy loading, Mariem will be talking more about this, I think, later, but lazy loading is basically another thing which is pretty standard. It really means that you load the parts of the page that are visible at each time first, so that and the rest of the page is sort of in the background, so that you get this sort of impact that you're actually seeing the important things that are in your window. You get them as fast as possible. Really, I think images usually load in parallel, but still it's important how you actually render them on the page and show them, so that you get the best sort of experience, because it's all about user experience. Okay. And third-party scripts, another thing which you should think about. What are third-party scripts? Well, there are all these things that don't really have to do with tracking, but are other things that you think might be useful. And you have to think about whether they really add anything to your site or not. This is perhaps a bit of sort of extra for people who really want to optimize a site, but I think you can look at these third-party scripts and save some milliseconds there as well. So without further ado, I will now leave the rest of the presentation to Mariem to talk about more advanced frameworks. So take it away, Mariem.
Thank you, David. Those were some really good insights you came up with. So for the second part of this presentation, we will be focusing on some key web application models that have a great impact on the site's performance. Today, we will be focusing on single-page applications and PWAs, progressive web applications. So we will start with the single-page applications. So how they work is that it doesn't require, a single-page application doesn't require a reload for new requests. So all of the resources, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScripts, are loaded separately from the data, from everything that you get from the backend. And it's built on a decoupled architecture between front end and back end. So your front end loads on the client side. You have your application, let's say React or Vue or whatever it is. It lives on the client side and it loads the first time the user visits the site, and then that application continues communicating with the backend and getting data and updating whatever needs to update on the page without reloading unnecessarily. So we'll go through the architecture of single-page applications and compare it to traditional multiple page applications. So the key difference is that with a single page application, the presentation layer is actually on the client side. With multiple page applications, the presentation layer is with the other layers on the server side. And when the user visits the site through a browser, what they're getting from the server is just HTML pages. It's just the the resources. They're not getting as much the data. The data is kind of tied together with the HTML. It's not broken apart. But with the single page application, you first get the resources, and then they live there, and then you don't have to reload them every time a user navigates from one link to another. And then you build your application, you build your APIs on the service layer, and those APIs are constantly sending just JSON data back to the client side. So we will also look at the application lifecycle and the differences in that sense. So we talked a bit about how it works. So within a single page application, when a user visits your site the first time, there's an initial request that goes to the server or to the backend. And from that request, we are sending back template. It's like a skeleton of the website that is sent back to the client. And after that skeleton goes back, and the application, your front-end application goes back to the client, and it's registered there. That application starts communicating with the server and getting data from the server through AJAX requests. This is much different from the multi-page application, where you are always getting new HTML pages every time a user visits another URL. You're getting a new HTML page, and it triggers a page reload, which it's a lot of unnecessary data that didn't need to be reloaded. You didn't need to update it. It hasn't changed from one page to the other, but you're constantly doing it. So we will look into the advantages of single page application. So from what we mentioned, it's quite obvious that this kind of setup would influence the site speed quite a bit. So with a multiple page application, if we look at this quite simple kind of illustration, let's look at this as a e-commerce website. You have your catalog page, you have your header in peach, and then you have your filter menu on the side in blue, and then you have your body where you have the products in yellow in the middle, and then your footer. And then let's say the user navigates to another category. Let's say you have the breadcrumbs at the top of, let's say it's a skincare company, and then you have your creams, and then face creams as a subcategory, and the user wants to go back to creams in general, and then they click on a new category. When that happens in a multiple page application, everything gets reloaded. The header gets reloaded as well, the filters on the side gets reloaded, and the footer as well gets reloaded. So it's a lot of additional requests that are unnecessary. In a single page application with the same setup, if a user navigates from one category to the other, if it's not necessary to update any part of the page, any block, the header, the filter menu, the footer, we don't update it. We basically just get back the data, which in this case would be the products of the new category, and then we update we fill the part of the template with the relevant data, and then the page loads much faster. The user sees the data much faster. So in that sense, with this kind of setup, you can do a lot more with less. What that means is that basically with the same site on the same day with the same amount of traffic, with a single page application, you would need a lot less server resources and maybe even less servers. So in that sense, it's more. Let's go back. Let's go back to the slide. So in that sense, it's more cost effective, and it doesn't have to be just a cost benefit in that sense. So let's say you have a multi-page application and you decided to do the upgrade to a single page application, and you noticed that you had a certain amount of CPU. Let's say you have your servers with 8-core CPU or something like that, and then you notice that you have more resources than what you're using, what you need, and let's say you're paying more for that. if it's cloud setup and you're paying as you use, you don't have to scale down, and you don't have to pay less. You can do more with that. You can implement more features that in the past you wouldn't have been able to implement because of server resource, because maybe you would have needed an extra server. So in that sense, going into a single page application opens the door for you to grow your site and add more interesting things that would drive conversion and would increase the sales. So the other thing to note with a single page application is that generally the front-end frameworks that are tied closely to this kind of model, they offer really good reusability of components. So you start building your site, and the more you build into it and the longer you keep it, the easier it gets to implement front-end features. It takes less time, it takes less budget, and it also is built much nicer and much smoother, and developers are able to onboard a solution that is built that way much faster, and the code is easier to go through. And then the other thing that we mentioned with this decoupled backend and frontend is that when the user visits the site, you don't really need to, the first time, you don't need to wait for the backend. So already your frontend loads, and you're not waiting for the backend. It's different than with a multiple page application where they are tightly bound. You're not getting the data unless you're getting it within the document. So in that sense, it becomes a lot faster. Not only is it faster, a setup like that allows you to move parts around of the solution in the future and change technologies, and it's a much more future-proof solution. It's the future. It's a modern solution, and then I think it's becoming more and more of an attraction. I mean, if you look at just React, it's blown up in the past few years. So after this, we will move on to progressive web applications. So what they are actually is web applications that the user can install on their device. So they would work much similar to a mobile application, native mobile application, or a desktop application. So to build a progressive web application, you need a manifest file, you need HTTPS connection, which makes them, it adds security to them, and you need service workers. And what they are is basically scripts that are registered, and when they basically handle the network requests, and they cache the data that is generated from these requests so that the user can visit it later, and it opens the possibility for the application to, not only does it improve performance, it also opens the possibility for the application to be visited in offline mode. So we will look at the key advantages of progressive web applications. One of the key advantages that it brings forward is that it opens up the possibility for push notifications. So there was this customer engagement platform that they have noted that sending push notifications can increase app retention by up to 10 times. And what we can observe is that marketing emails, which would be the solution or the way to reach customers, they are perceived as a lot less personalized and a lot less relevant, and it also feels a bit more invasive compared to push notifications. Because push notifications, for it to reach the user, it requires an action from him to either install, whether it's a native app or a progressive web application, it requires from the user to actually install it, to actually invite this sort of entity into their phone. So it feels a lot less invasive. Of course, you can always overdo it. You can always send too many notifications that are not relevant to the user, and of course, in that case, you're basically gonna be shooting yourself in the foot. So, can we go back, David? So another thing to note is that MailChimp, which is a marketing mailing tool similar to Campaign Monitor or Voyado, is they have actually noted that the click rate for e-commerce sites emails were recorded at 2%, whereas if we compare it to a result that Retail Dive have noted, they have actually found that push notifications have an average engagement rate of 21%. So that's a huge difference. And there is one thing to note with push notifications. It's not, let's not say possible, but it's not the easiest to do it with iOS. You can do it in a bit of a clever way, but it's still a dirty way. So there has been a lot of push from developers to get Apple to support web push notifications, but unfortunately, up until now, it would have, if you would want to have push notifications with your progressive web application on iOS devices, it would have to be done in quite dirty way. let's leave it at that. So we will move on to the other benefit, which is cross-platform. We can go back one slide, David. Cross-platform compatibility. What this means basically is that you develop your web application and you want to upgrade it to a PWA. It will take some work, but if you compare that work to if you wanted to build a native app, there are solutions. I mean, if you compare the technology now to a few years back, the hybrid or cross-platform solutions for building native mobile applications have come a long way, but it would take more elbow grease than a progressive web application. If we go to the next slide, it's basically what we're saying is that it's not that it's easy to implement, but it's definitely easier than a native app, especially if you already have your web application and you just want to make it so that it's installable. So the other benefits that we would get with a progressive web application, if we go to the next slide, is what we discussed with the service workers, that you can make the app accessible offline, of course, within certain limits, but then it's still a big plus that it's not something that you would have with a normal web application. And if we move on to the other benefits, it's that if you compare it to a native web application, it's actually, you're not actually installing the app on the phone, you're downloading the app on the phone. And I actually tried it myself with a web application and compared the time it took to download it. It's unbelievably different. It actually, the second you add it, it's already there. So in that sense, a native mobile application might alienate some users. If you go in, you have to look for the app in the App Store, you have to identify yourself and you have to install it and you have to wait for it to install. And generally when you open it, in general, mobile applications, most of the time they will require you to do some registration before you can use them, or they will at least prompt you as soon as you open it. But if you compare it to a web application, the normal way it's built is that you already, as soon as you come into the app, you have your start page and you have already some content that you can visit and that you can navigate through before you are prompted to sign up. So in that sense, it can be a lot more powerful to go that route with a progressive web application before you decide to do a full-fledged project and move into the build your own native mobile application. So if we go to the next slide, what we will be discussing next is some case studies, because we can say that this is good and this has this benefit and that benefit and that advantage, but it's still good to look at the numbers and look at the success stories, other e-commerce sites that have developed, that have used the technology and that have registered really good numbers from it. So the first case that we will be looking at is a brand for luxury cosmetics brand called Lancome. So Lancome wanted to increase traffic on their site. So what they did is that they upgraded their existing websites to a progressive web application, and they actually increased their conversion rates by 17%. Not only did they increase the conversion rates, they actually had quite substantial number of increase in iOS mobile sessions, and also in recovered carts via push notifications that we talked about. So it's the numbers here are quite astonishing in showing that it can have a drastic impact on an e-commerce site's conversion and sales if done well. The other case that we will be looking at is George.com. So George.com is a UK clothing brand. It's a part of the of Asda Walmart. So they actually managed to boost their mobile conversion of up to 31% after they moved on to a progressive web application. Not only that, they have seen a great increase in a lot of other metrics, like the page load, which we're talking about site speed. When they did the upgrade, they managed to make their site much faster. They got more 20% more page views. They got 2 times less bounce rates and 28% longer average time on the site. So those are some really good numbers that I would say are very, very encouraging to if you're working on a e-commerce site and you're stumped for ideas of something that could make an impact. I think it can have a great impact if you do it right.
All right. Thank you, Mariem, and thank you, David. I think this was very insightful, a very insightful talk. It's I think it's super exciting development that we're seeing, that the what you can do with web technology, and that it's actually can basically create like it almost like there is this issue with push notification on iOS, but that you can have.
But there's actually because they tried, a lot of developers tried signing petitions, but they still couldn't get Apple to budge. But there's a quite hacky solution where you kind of the same way you would have boarding passes and stuff like that on your Apple Wallet that send you notifications. You just have to use a tool to kind of register a pass.
Okay.
That will start sending notifications similar to native notifications, but from your app.
All right.
So.
But there are no signs from Apple that they're going to change this?
No. They actually, there's a discussion in their forum, and a lot of developers are asking, but no reply back from Apple.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's quite fun.
Yeah. But still, I think there is a great potential there I think what's good is when you want to really elevate your e-commerce to kind of the next level, not just in terms of speed, which will increase the enhance the user experience, increase conversion rates, but also very interesting, these kind of offline I started to think about, that you can provide. So if you have a content as an important strategy with your brand, that you could have, you could load, content pages, or even maybe even a podcast and things that you could make those accessible, so that you can, if you're out flying, for example, you can take part of that. So that's just one idea, but I think it's quite exciting what it opens up. So did we get, Michaela, did you have any questions from the audience today?
No questions yet, but please, if some of you come up with any questions, just write them in the chat and we will take them up now as we go. We can start with the surprise giveaway if you want, so people can come up with some questions during the time. And also, I will share a link in the chat so you also can find the chat, maybe for those of you who haven't found it yet. But I will share a link if you have any more questions or interested to maybe have a meeting. So you can book a meeting with Mikael and just have a quick chat if you have any other questions or anything else. And if you joined late, you can also go back and to our website, cloud9.se, and you will find a recording of this webinar afterwards. So you haven't missed anything. But yeah, moving on to the giveaway, we have from Dermosil, Micke. It's actually a Finnish company that we have worked with for a very long time.
It's one of our key clients that we are helping with their strategic e-commerce development. And they've been kind enough to sponsor some surprise gifts. So these are, sponsored from them too.
Great. So this is the first one. It's a licorice soap with some candy in it. And the first two that will receive this great and nice Christmas gift is Lisette Moberg and Elin Svedling. And we will send it to you. We will contact you after. And the next one we have is also from Dermosil. It's, I don't know if you can see it. Sorry. But it's kitchen soap and a hand soap with cardamom and orange smell. Super nice. And the two that have won that is CA. I have your email, but I will contact you. You know who you are. and Matthias. So yeah, great. Let's see if there has been any other questions in the chat. No questions. Do we have any questions, Mika?
No.
We talk about this all day with David and Mariem.
But I encourage you to reach out to us, to me, if you found this topic to be interesting. We are here to help. This is something that we are very excited about. We monitor these technologies constantly, and I think this is especially the PWA, the progressive web apps, I think that's actually one of the most exciting things that has been happening on the web, in the last few years. So if you get excited about this, just reach out to us and we can help you.
Yeah. Thank you, David and Mariem, again. Thank you for joining us and share your expertise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and Merry Christmas.
Yes. Merry Christmas, everyone. Take care. Over and out.
Bye.
Bye.